Okay, everyone. Today we're going to take a little look at Exploration 2 here. As you can see, the title up at the top, Analyzing Patterns and the Number of Life Forms Over Time. So still kind of looking at, what we can find from fossils and setting up that fossil record, the history of life forms that we have on Earth, okay? This one's going to talk a lot about mass extinctions and just things that we can see as we look through the fossil record and rock columns and those types of things. Okay, so like as we look here, number 12 says, explain one inference you can make about fossils from the information in the rock layer images. Well, from looking at this, we can see that our trilobites right here, if we find them there, that they are gone after we have this Permian Triassic extinction boundary. So since we can see that they are present lower but not present higher up, these rocks lower, these are older, so we could say that trilobite fossils are more than 248 million years old, since we know when this extinction event happened, and we can see that marked in the rock layers right there, recorded just naturally from sediments in the rock layers right there. This next page, pay attention to this page. Again, you don't have to memorize something like this, but this just has phenomenally helpful information on the big mass extinction events that have happened in Earth's history. The one that we think about the most is this one from the Cretaceous Tertiary period, 65 million years ago. And we think about that one because it's the most recent and it's the one that killed off all the dinosaurs, basically, all right? But you can see these other extinction events, this Triassic Jurassic extinction event, that knocked off almost as many species as what this most recent one that killed off the dinosaurs did. Okay, the Permian Triassic, that's actually the line in the rock layer from up above. Largest extinction event, about 80 to 85% of all organisms died off in that one. Okay, this one in the Devonian, 70 to 80% of all species. This first one up here, up to 85% of all species. Okay, so those are huge numbers of organisms that died off. And these aren't all from impacts from outer space. A couple of these probably are, but shifts in tectonic plates, climate change. That one's a volcanic or a comet strike. Volcanic eruptions here. Okay, so lots of different things can potentially cause these, but it's a situation where you have a very rapid change in the environments, and organisms aren't able to adapt to that, so a lot of organisms die off. Okay, here on number 13 it says mass extinctions are caused by global environmental changes, and during a mass extinction event biodiversity in the fossil record decreases. So you have a drop in the total number of organisms when you have a mass extinction. That's basically what it means. Okay, so global and then decreases there for number 13. All right, this next little part, the next few questions, have us analyzing the trends that we see on these charts, on these graphs. Okay, so number 14 says, describe the trend you see in each graph. What is the relationship between mass extinctions and biodiversity over time? Okay, so that's kind of the bottom one here, right? So we have biodiversity going up, 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 mass extinction, it drops. Okay, then biodiversity goes up, mass extinction, it drops. Biodiversity goes up, mass extinction, it drops. And then up, a little drop, up, 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 a little drop, up, up, up. Okay, so mass extinctions, if we look at the answer that I have typed in up here, mass extinctions will reduce biodiversity in the short term. So lots of things die off, but they're followed by an increase in biodiversity, an increase in new species because they're able to fill into those habitats that have been cleared off. 15, does the top graph provide evidence that extinctions are a normal part of Earth's history? Explain your reason. Absolutely. Okay, so as we look at this, there's going to be ups and downs, big up for mass extinction, right? There's going to be ups and downs in the extinction rate, but never are we seeing the extinction rate completely down to zero. Okay, so throughout Earth's history, there have been organisms that have gone extinct. Sometimes we have more things that go extinct, sometimes we have less things that go extinct, but there's always going to be organisms that are going extinct. Okay, final one on this page, number 16. Mass extinctions do not cause permanent reductions in biodiversity on Earth. After each extinction event, the number of families or the number of organisms and the amount of biodiversity increases rapidly over time. And that's what we see here. After the swift drop from mass extinction, we start to see almost immediately the number of organisms, the number of different types of organisms starts to increase, and that starts to come back. So that's what it's talking about here with number of families, number of different types of organisms there, essentially. All right, as we keep moving down, just some more examples that we have, more things, happening with these mass extinctions. It's talking about analyzing, the extinction event and specific critters that we see either before or after an extinction. And down here to question number 17, it says, observe the patterns in plant diversity shown in the graph. How might species of flowering plants have survived the KPG extinction? Okay, so what we're looking at here, whoa, that just went way away from where we needed to be. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm back. Little mouse malfunction there. All right, so we've got some different types of plant. We have angiosperms, cycads, I don't even know how you say that one, conifers, and then ginkgos. Okay, so we can see our number of species, our diversity going up. Okay, but then we can see a few extinction events. Okay, where like the cycads and however you say that blue one are going to be dropping off rapidly here, but our angiosperms keep going up. Okay, here at about 80 million years ago, we have lots of drops kind of in everything, but the angiosperms keep going up. Okay, so we see kind of towards present day, angiosperms kind of dominating the landscapes. Well, kind of if you think about that, that means angiosperms, these are flowering plants, okay, and most of our plants we see outside today are probably flowering plants, okay? These have adaptations that have helped them to survive these extreme conditions, okay? It's like trees losing their leaves in the wintertime so they can handle the cold better, okay? So not being very sensitive to cold. Okay, having very hardy seeds. So the seeds are able to survive, maybe if it's dry or if it's cold or just some sort of harsh conditions. Okay, so whatever the situations might be, the angiosperms have been better adapted over time and are able to survive these extinction events better than some of these other plants, is basically what it's showing us in that question there. All right, we're not going to do this hands-on lab here, so I'm just going to slide over that real quick. Okay, and then this gives us this next question for number 18 down here. It gives us 4 different locations, and it asks us, why might different types of fossils be found in rock layers that come before and after a rock layer that contains no fossils? Okay, so if you have a rock layer that contains no fossils, what that tells you is that you've got an extinction event happening there, a mass extinction. Okay, so if you have certain types of organisms before a mass extinction, many types of those organisms will die off. Okay, that will open up lots of new habitat, and new types of organisms will take their place in the environment after the extinction event. So you typically see a significant change in the types of organisms that are kind of dominant in your habitat after one of those extinction events. Back, 65 million years ago, dinosaurs would have been the main critters that were running around on our planet. They all die off basically, and that kind of opens up the habitats for mammals to take over. And that's basically what we see today, especially with humans being kind of the dominant species that we have on our planet. All right, let's see. For number 19, it's talking about using CAT scans, CT scanners. Some of you might have been, heard or had a medical issue and had to have a CAT scan at some point before. CT is probably a better way to say that than CAT scan. But anyway, basically takes a whole bunch of x-rays and gets a good look at the inside of your body. And we can use these on fossils as well, okay? So let's see, it basically says, how can CT scanners solve the problem of damaging delicate fossils? Okay, so the idea here is that CT scanners can look inside fossils without having to, physically break it open to see inside. We just take images of it and can make a 3D image there. And they can also provide very detailed images of fossils with limited handling of the fossil. So we're not having to hold it and move it around and pass it to our buddy scientist over here, who then holds it and moves it around. Really one time moving that onto the CAT scanner, taking the scan of it, then you can put the fossil away, and and then you have that nice detailed 3D image that you can study after that initial cascade. So a little bit of limited handling that we have there. All right, final little part here talks about this. I don't even know how we say it. Meganeura. I don't know, really big dragonfly looking thing here, right? How big did it say it was? Wingspan is over 2 feet wide. Okay, this lived about 320 million years ago in the Carboniferous period. Okay, so that's a big dragonfly, right? So number 20 says, what modern organisms have an ecological role around ponds today that is similar to the role that our Meganeura had during the Carboniferous period? Explain your answer, okay? So for this, it says up there that it was basically a predator, okay? So as long as you mentioned any types of predators here, it doesn't have to be an insect, right? So it could be something like a dragonfly or a mantis hanging around the water there. You know, you could think about foxes or birds, basically any type of a predator could have that same function as what this ancient dragonfly did. Number 21, write a series of logical steps that you could use to infer the type of climate that existed during Meganeura's, I don't know if it's how you say that or not, Meganeura's time. All right, so if we kind of think back through this, okay, so today in these areas we can find large amounts of coal. Okay, coal comes from ancient plants that have died and decomposed and broken down. The carbon has been converted into coal. So since we find large amounts of coal today, we can infer that in the past there were large amounts of plants that would have been present to form that coal. Okay, in order to get the large amounts of plants, that tells us that the climate would have had to have been relatively warm and relatively wet. Kind of think maybe, you know, like tropical rainforest situations here, right? So we can use something we find today and then try to infer kind of step by step what things would have been like in the past. Okay. All right, so if you have additional questions about Exploration 2, feel free to send us an email or ask during class or office hours. So have a great day, everyone.